and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Modelcraft, and welcome back to Modelling for Beginners with the Airfix Mosquito PRXVI in what I think will be the final episode actually. So where did we leave it? We left it with decals on and gloss coat on, the X22 with Mr. Colour Thinner hopefully, a good coat of that, and leaving it to dry for a decent length of time, and I think I left mine for a good week or two before I touched it again. And I sanded it. So here it is now. It has had a good little sand with the Trizact P3000 and water, and you may not really be able to see it, but it has lessened the appearance of the edge of the decals quite substantially. That extra little bit of depth in the clear coat and then rubbing it back has evened the surface out quite well. And then that's left to dry again, because the act of sanding the paint down it doesn't soften it as such, but taking the hard outer shell away off the paint, I find that it's best to let that sort of re-harden again before you really go very much further, which this is ready to carry on with work now. So in the meantime, utilise all that drying time to fettle up the rest of the pieces that have to go to finish off the kit. Now this is quite a simple kit, so there are not that many parts, and as you can see they are all painted. So we have wheel hubs, propeller spinners, this is the canopy window, 4x undercarriage doors, the gun sight here, aerial, tail wheel, main undercarriage units, tyres, propellers and drop tanks. These are flat coated, the propellers are flat coated, and the rest of this is pretty much ready to go. I need to paint the tyre and put a little dark wash on these parts, but other than that they're good. As you can see, these parts have been mounted on spatulas using blue tack, so the spinners I assembled onto the back plates, the spinner back plates with blue tack, and used that to hold them down, and these have been painted, I believe it was Blue Angels Blue, pretty sure it was Blue Angels Blue, Mr. Colour, and then they've been flat coated so they're ready. Just a random blue. These were painted with the model and these have been flat coated, they're good to go. Propellers mounted on cocktail sticks, just push through that central hole, paint them yellow first. If you want a super bright yellow, you'll need to paint them white first and then yellow, then mask off the tips, and they've been painted with XF85. What is on there? Which is rubber black from Tamiya. The silver parts have been painted with Tamiya lacquer paint LP11, which is a super nice colour for doing things like this. It's not so bright that it looks like you're trying to do a natural metal finish and failed, but it's bright enough to obviously be silver, which is what we want. And that is it. Drop tanks as well, painted along the way, and are now flat coated and ready to fit the thing together. A quick note on that, I think I did mention it during the painting phase probably, but the painting diagram shows the drop tanks as being black because they happen to be on the black line of the invasion stripes. I thought when I saw it that was highly unlikely, honestly, and I looked through a few photographs online. If you Google up Mosquito US or the base, anything like that, you should get a few pictures of these, and the drop tanks are clearly not black on the ones with D-Day stripes, so I've done them blue. So that's it, all the parts are there or thereabouts, they're certainly very close, just a little bit of assembly, a little bit of washing and detail painting, all exactly the same as what we've done previously to this point. So the next job on the airframe is to put a little bit of panel line wash in a few places before we add a flat coat. So let's look at that next. Right, now there are a multitude of panel line washes out there available for use, and you can make your own. I tend to prefer, or have mainly used, oil washes and latterly enamel washes. I really like the versatility of them, and oil washes are very, very easy to make yourself. actually sell her enamel washes if you have enamel paints kicking about. So what we're going to use today on this model is Tamiya Panoline Accent Colour. Now I'm going to apologise immediately to all my UK viewers because this stuff is very, very difficult to get hold of in the UK. You can get it off eBay and the likes, but it's horribly expensive. So I'm sorry about that, but it is brilliant. So if you feel like investing in it, there are only 6 colours in the range actually. Black, dark grey, grey, light grey, brown and dark brown. I was lucky enough to pick these up whilst I was out in the States fairly recently. But yeah, sorry. I'm going to use them anyway. Now on this occasion, the dark grey, much as it appears fairly dark through the bottle, it isn't dark enough to really show up super well on this model. So what I'm going to do is mix some of this grey and a little touch of this dark brown to create my own slightly darker colour to use on this model. They do have a delightful little applicator brush, which is, unlike a lot of the Ammo of MIG brushes, is actually useful. Don't need gallons of it, even though we're going to do the whole thing. Now the thing with the Tamiya enamel washes that I've found is the MIG, Ammo of MIG and the AK enamel washes are somewhat, you can kind of reawaken them when you get in there with your enamel thinners. Even if you let it dry completely, you can mostly sort of wipe it back out again once you get the enamel thinners in. Tamiya much less so. If you're using a Tamiya enamel wash on a matte surface, deal with it straight away, because if you let it dry you are going to have a whale of a time getting it off the places where you don't want it. So there you go, I've mixed up a darker colour which has a bit of a brown hue, that's fine. The other thing I've got here is some enamel thinners. This is not Humbrol enamel thinners, it's just that I had a Humbrol tin kicking about and I basically have chucked all kinds in here. There's Ammo Odorless, there's AK, there's Rebel, there's everything. Popped a bit of that into my palette as well. So you can use any old brush to put it on. Now shall I zoom or not? Let's zoom in a little bit. There we go. You can slather the whole thing in wash and then wipe it off. I would argue that that's a really bad way to do it, because you're then going to spend an inordinate amount of time attempting to remove the wash from all the places you don't want it. You want the wash to cover about 0.8% of the model's surface, so why on earth would you get into a game where you're cleaning it off of over 90%? It's silly. So I don't do that. I'm going to put it where I want it, and only where I want it. And I hope you can see that the capillary action on this stuff is quite remarkable. You can touch a panel line and it will travel by itself for quite some distance. You need a bit more here because these lines are bigger. Now because of the nature of the Mosquito being made out of wood, the smooth skin, there are really no panel lines, and those that are actually are removable panels, so it's completely appropriate to use wash in them, if anyone was wondering. just kind of reapplying it along those control surfaces because I want that panel line to be full. And I'm also going to do just a little bit of work back here, not too much because they appear quite dark anyway. And all I want to do, honestly, is just delineate these separate panels. Just make them stand out just a touch more. I'm not after black and white. And that will do. So whilst I did just take great pains to tell you not to let this stuff dry, you do need to let it dry a little bit in order for this to be easy. So just go and make yourself a brew, listen to some lift music for a couple of minutes, and I'll come back when this is slightly dried off for the removal procedure. The tools required for removal then couldn't really be simpler. You need a paintbrush which will come to a point. The size of the paintbrush is mostly irrelevant as long as it will come to a good point, and or a cotton bud which needs to be moistened with enamel thinner, but it does not need to be soaking wet, just enough to moisten the surface slightly. Now with excuse the paint on my finger, with panels that are quite sharply defined as these are, the cotton bud is quite often the quickest and easiest way. It's less inclined because of the depth of the panel lines to just drag the wash straight back out again. With kits that have shallow panel lines, things like Vesdi kits, things like that, you're just going to pull the wash straight back out again if you try and use a cotton bud. Likewise, if you try to remove the wash immediately whilst it's still completely wet, it's quite likely to just pick it all up and pull it straight back out of the panel line. So it's counterproductive. Now maybe you can see, maybe you can't. I'm aware the lighting is not ideal. Maybe actually I'll come in even tighter still with the camera to show it a bit more, but yeah, let's do that. Let's zoom way in. Watch this, I'm going to work well off camera now. Let's look at this area here, and hopefully you'll be able to see that it takes a few swipes for the excess residual wash to actually come away from the surface. Here we go. Yeah, hopefully that's coming through quite well. Doesn't just wipe straight back off because it's dried on that little bit. You should consider at least wiping in roughly the direction you think the airflow may go in. It's very rarely as simple as straight fore and aft like people think, but it's certainly a lot less jarring visually if you do leave any streaks deliberately or otherwise, if they're going roughly with the grain rather than against it, shall we say. So this panel line on the nacelle here is a bit shallower, so I'm going to show you the second method now. Paintbrush. So I've dipped this in the thinner, and as you can see I'm removing most of it. Again, you can't see because I totally did that off camera, so I've removed most of the thinner. You can see that's not leaving much of a mark on the paper now, because again we don't want a super wet brush, just enough. And with that, and this is going to be very awkward for me to do at this angle, it's the opposite of colouring in. You creep up on the panel line using the tip of the brush and wash away the excess colour, just like that. When you've done it from one side, turn yourself or the model around, whichever is easiest, and come back and do it from the other side. By doing this, you are actually going to push a little bit of that residual wash in to the panel line, and if you're super excitable you can even create streaks and panel line effects where there are none. by doing this. You're literally painting a line onto the surface of the model. Have a look around this area here. So again, I've reloaded the brush with thinner. You can see that's wet. We'll remove the majority of it. Try and get myself into a good position. Sneak up on that panel line. And again, I hope you can see that the excess wash does take a light touch of persuasion to come up. So just reinforcing my point about making sure the model needs to have a decent hard surface that's going to reject this thinners, so that you can do this without damaging the paintwork. I'm quite deliberately not messing about with streaking or any other weathering on this model. It is supposed to be a basic build after all said and done, so just the panel line wash will suffice this time around. If I do another one of these, or if we incrementally adjust the difficulty level in these series, then we'll look at streaking, weathering and fading then. Now you can probably also see that I'm sort of abusing this brush a little bit. You don't want to be using your good brushes to do this. What is this? This is a cheap Amazon paintbrush. You can get like 10 of these for a couple of quid or something, but they will hold a point well enough to do this, whilst remaining cheap enough for me not to be concerned about ruining them by doing this. And there we go. I will quite often come back with the cotton bud just for a final rub over, just to pick up any little sort of odds and sods. But it actually also leaves quite a nice effect sometimes to leave a little bit of the blooming and streaking behind. It looks relatively like a natural sort of weathering effect. Let's take these out. As with everything, I'm not putting any force into this. This is literally, it's weight of the cotton bud pretty much. Okay, this front one, a lot of it has pushed out. You can see that panel line's not massively well highlighted. I'm not too worried, but if that happens, don't panic. Just let the enamel thinners evaporate off, reapply the wash and do it again. Do that as many times as you need to get the effect that you want to get. There we go. That is that main wing done. Here we are then. All of the wash is complete. I've done the whole model, so all of the panel lines on the kit have been highlighted with the wash mixture, as I showed you just on that one wing, top and bottom. Now you might be thinking, ooh, it's not very obvious. It's entirely deliberate. I didn't want it to be very obvious. I just wanted a little bit of an accent on the panel lines, nothing crazy, because that's how I like it. If you, the modeller, want some more contrast in the finish, then clearly just use a darker colour, or conversely, if you don't like the look of it, then use a less contrasting colour. It's your choice at the end of the day. There's no set in stone rule about what colour you should use for your washes. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so the next stage or phase for this then is the flat coat. So with the wash complete, I'm not going to do any other weathering, as I already mentioned. So it's time to put flat coat on so that the masking can come off the canopies and final assembly can happen. As you can see here, all the other parts are completely ready to go. The spinners and props are glued together. The wheels are not actually glued into position yet, they still rotate. They will probably get a little touch of glue later, but for the minute I'll leave them free to move so that the flat spots can be lined up properly when they're fitted. You may be able to see that I have fitted the aerial. Now, there we go. It shouldn't look like that, okay? There shouldn't be a big circular panel line around the base of the fairing, but as with, you know, with this being a sort of a beginner focus build, I didn't want to modify the kit to make that look more like it should. What I would do on a normal build, shall we say, is cut the aerial off that base and fit it and smooth it in, drill a hole into it and drill a hole into the aerial itself, and do it that way. But for this build I've just left it as it comes. Yeah, I fitted that so that the flat coat is consistent across the whole lot and it will even out. You can see there's a slight colour difference there that is purely caused by the gloss coat, and hopefully will all even out. So I'm going to put all of these parts into a storage space, so depending how safe your work area is, you can just use something. This is a yoghurt pot. You can put them in the pot or in the lid, depends how safe your area is, how proof it is against things being upset. I'm going to put them in the pot because I'm a clumsy fool. Get those out of the way and we'll bring them back later on. Yeah, nice and safe. Could go over here and some of the chaos that you can't see. So flat coat then. We are going to use VMS. There are many different clear coats of the flat and the gloss variety out there, many. Over the years I just haven't ever found a flat coat that is easy to apply and doesn't massively change the colour of the model. The closest I got before VMS came along is this stuff. If you don't have any VMS, you can go out and get a bit of this Galleria acrylic matte varnish. This huge great tub cost about £8 from, do you know, I think it was a Hobbycraft. So it isn't expensive. It's very gloopy, if you can see it in there. But you can just apply that straight out of this bottle as it comes, and this is pretty good. Dries quite fast, easy to use. Doesn't change the colour too much, but it does change it a bit. And then VMS came along, and this stuff is witchcraft, quite simply, because I did a test spray on some black with this when I first got it, and black's the big one. Normally with flat coats of black, you can just grey off the finish so badly when you put the flat coat on. This actually made it look darker. I don't know how they've done it, but it's really great. As you can see, there's not a lot left in here. Got another one over here, which I'm going to need because I'm going to just demonstrate something which is kind of annoying about this stuff. It says on it to shake thoroughly, and if you shake thoroughly, this is what happens. It gets really, really bubbly, and the bubbles just, it's quite a thick, it's almost like wallpaper paste. It's kind of thick, and those bubbles, as you can see, hopefully, they're quite reluctant to leave once you've shaken it like that, and that, for me anyway, translates to the spraying, and it's kind of annoying. So I don't do it like that anymore. When it stands for a while, you'll find that the bit on the top, I can't show you because when I tip it over it goes over there, but there is a thin layer where the thinners is detached a little bit from the rest of it. But I'm going to mix it up by much more gently shaking it so that I don't induce a load of bubbles. And then I'll be back in a moment with the airbrush and I'll show you how to put it on. Alright, I've got some in my airbrush. There we go. Haven't thinned it, you just want this straight out of the tub, and it is very thick. Now this is my Revolution CR. This has a 0.5mm needle in it, and this airbrush struggles to put this stuff on. It's quite heavy to get through the airbrush. I do have a Fender airbrush with a 0.8 needle in it, which has a much easier time spraying it, but it's probably even just a little bit too much for a smaller model. With a bigger model, that is the way to go without a doubt, but with this I'm just going to struggle slightly and use the Revolution. As well as being very thick, which in itself makes it a little bit difficult to get it through the brush, it builds up on the needle instantly. So if you stop spraying, you basically have to clean the end of the needle off before you can start again, because it gets really cloggy really quickly. But despite those downsides, this is simply the best matte lacquer I have yet found. So you have to put it on wet, and it's going to look awful, but you have to trust the process, trust the paint, and trust me, honestly. So let's go. I'm just going to do a little bit on the towel just to show you how it goes. Okay, you can see how nasty that looks because it's water based. Every little bit of muck and nonsense in there looks massive right now. It's quite a heavy coat, but it's the only way to go. I'm just going to blow it a little, get it to start drying off. It's a long way from fully dry, but you can already see the difference, and you can also see that it really hasn't done anything to the colour. It's really cracking stuff, but be warned, the only way to apply it really is heavily, like I just showed you. Put it on wet and walk away. It does take a little bit of time to dry. It's not as quick drying as some acrylics are, but I'll carry on and I'll come back to you when that's all on. There we go, not shiny anymore, as you can see. That was just the one wet coat over the whole model, and it's not shiny anymore, but it also isn't completely flat and lifeless, which is a finish I really do not enjoy, actually. You can also see, I think I can see it with my eyes, it's possibly not really coming through on the video. There's some very slight sort of streaks and shades going on where I've cleaned off the wash and it's left some sort of slightly dirty areas and some slightly cleaner ones and all the rest of it, but that's just a byproduct of what I've been doing. It's not a deliberate weathering effect as such. So, demasking time. It's always one of the most fun times, I think. Take my foam sausages out of the radiators. You just go straight in the bin. You could reuse them if you really wanted to, but I don't. They just go in the bin. Pop those off. Done a great job of sticking in there the whole time. I didn't use any glue whatsoever on those. Really nice idea from Airfix, that. And then the somewhat tedious job of picking all these masks off. Now the ones that are made from Tamiya tape or other brands of tape that look like Tamiya tape, like these circles, should come off very easily and not really leave any mess behind, which is proving to be the case. But where I've used foil, it will be more difficult, and I'm working off camera, I'm sorry. It will be a little bit more difficult. You just have to tease at the edge of it with pliers? I mean, I guess they are pliers of a sort. Tweezers. So use the side of the tip like that and just flick. Be gentle, because it's ever so easy to scratch the transparency underneath, or indeed the carefully applied paintwork. You just try and pick it up out of the corner of the the edge. There's no corner on a circle, gent. Yeah, I know what I mean, alright? If you get lucky, it'll pop off in one go, but it normally doesn't. If there's one downside to masking with bare metal foil, it's how fiddly it is to take it off again. But the reward for that fiddliness is proper paint tight edges. Even when you spend time mucking about with sanding and priming and what have you around transparencies, as I've had to do on occasion with those that don't fit very well, you're safe with bare metal foil. It also will tend to want to stick to the tweezers, as you can probably see. Another thing you're going to get is little flakes of paint that fly about everywhere and stick to the model because of static. Don't worry about that. We'll just brush those off. And another time. Several minutes later, and I have finally got all the bare metal foil off this canopy, and there we are, bringing it to life. The other major disadvantage with using bare metal foil is the glue it leaves behind. It looks frankly horrid, does it not? But I'm going to show you a really quick, really easy way to get rid of it, which also has the added benefit of making the canopies look even better, and that is WD-40. Yes, unbelievable, I know. I'm going to do it off camera because I always make a mess, and I've started to remember to do it over the bin, but I squirt, and I do love the smell of WD-40. Squirt some on a cotton bud, and get to rubbing on these canopies, and the glue disappears like magic very, very quickly. And WD-40 will not damage the paint at all, so it's a win-win. We just run over all the areas. If you look at them obliquely, you can easily see when the glue's gone whilst you're rubbing across it. This will also get rid of those little pieces of paint I was talking about. They'll wipe off in this process as well. Finally, the actual Bomb Aimers blister. There it is. All the glue's gone. Just make double dog sure. Yep. Looking much better, I think you'll agree already, but then just get a nice little microfiber cloth. Just gently buff it. This buffing will remove the WD-40 residue. You see it left a sort of a stain on the paint. Get rid of that. It will get rid of it off the transparent areas too. And what you're left with is just some very sharp looking canopies. Just a quick check. I can't see any gloop left on there. There you go. Brand new. I really wish I'd painted those shelves before I fitted those windows. Now, I did fit this with focus, maybe, please. I did fit this blister with the MO Ultra Glue. This is stuff, the PVA style glue, with a view to being able to pop it off if I needed to. But that stuff sticks really, really well, and I did have a little go at trying to pop it off and it wasn't playing. So I'm going to leave it on there because I can see that I do not have a load of clag and dust that's stuck on the inside anyway, so I don't need to take it off. That does mean that the little gun sight looking thing that's in there, oops, isn't going to be fitted, but I'm really, really unconcerned by that, so I'm just going to leave that. I'll clean these camera windows of WD as well. And that's it. The ones that Tamiya tape was used on don't need any help, they're just fine. That's the canopies, all done, all clean. All I need to do is fit that side window. Now the reason I left it off, if anyone has forgotten, let me grab a micro brush. I've got a stash of them here somewhere, there they are. You quite often will get little bits of static induced contamination on the inside of canopies when you have to spray them in situ like we have with this model. So I left this side window off just in case that happened, because then I can simply get in there with a micro brush like this, because they wipe right off. They're not well stuck or anything, it's literally just a little bit of vapour that attaches. If you're struggling for access, then get the micro brush and just aggressively bend it like so, and then it will wipe over the inner surfaces a little bit more effectively. And you can just clean anything that's in there, you can clean it up. With this model, again, I checked before I painted it, but you can, if you're careful, reach all the way in and even clean the inside of these windows as well. So before fitting this side window, just make sure you're happy with the finish of all of the insides of your windows. You can even pop a little bit of WD on this if you want to clean those insides. It's fine, it won't hurt anything. And it does sometimes help to get any kind of residue that might be sitting in there, any little bits of adhesive from tapes, anything, gets rid of it. It's perfectly safe, you can see. There we go, it's just got a little bit of WD on it now, and it glosses up transparencies beautifully. Again, if you want to polish the WD back off again, gotta remember to work. If I work under the camera, I can't really see what I'm doing, that's the problem. Then just get a clean micro brush and just polish over it again on the inside, and you will end up with a beautiful set of transparencies. A little bit of effort, yes, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, here we are, final assembly time. So with the canopies all sorted out, nice and clear, looking lovely, it really is time to put the last few pieces on, and we can call it done. But I just wanted to show you one more tip before I do that. So you may remember way back when we painted these exhausts using the Mr. Metal Colour Stainless. That's all I ever did, painted them with a brush with Mr. Metal Stainless. They have been flat coated at the same time as the model has, as you can see. So it's dulled them down significantly and made them look a little bit more exhausty, for want of a better word. The last thing I'm going to do, now that the matte coat is on, is add some wash. I've got some brown Tamiya panel liner here. I'm literally, am I in shot? Yes I am. Just going to paint a little bit of that across each stub like so. Doesn't need a lot. This is a fairly bright brown. aircraft exhausts of this era were generally made out of a metal called Inconel, which is somewhat similar to stainless. Doesn't rust at all, but it does discolour with heat, and obviously some exhaust pipes will get exhaust staining as well from the actual fumes coming out of the engine. Not so much with these stubs, but some will. There we go. All you need to do with that is leave it to dry. Don't touch it, don't buff on it or anything else. Just let that dry and leave it as it is, and that will give a nice kind of very flat, dull, exhausty looking finish on them. But just have a close look at that first set I painted. They're already drying, and I think it's fair to say in this scale that that's a pretty decent representation. Another thing you could do if you wanted to is just go along with a fine brush and pop a little bit of black paint on the end of each of those, just to make them look a little bit more like they're hollow. But yes, it is time just to put all the parts on. And just a quick word about adhesives for doing that. You can of course use the same liquid cement that's been used throughout the build, but be careful because it's quite easy to melt the paint with that and make a mess. So the top glues really for final assembly that I generally use are super glue or ultra glue. I do use extra thin at times when it's relevant, or when it's the best thing to use, I will use that. But these glues, especially the ultra glue, won't damage the paint, and they go off relatively quickly to allow you to set things up for fitting. I have test fitted everything here and it all just drops into place really easily, so I'm not going to film the process of putting all these parts on. It's simple stuff. If you've got this far, it isn't going to be an issue, as I say, because everything pops in there beautifully. So this is the last time you're going to see this thing on its belly, and when I come back we'll have a completed model. You join me here very much in the final throes of assembly, so as you can maybe tell, we've got wheels now and the Mosquito is standing proud, tanks are on and everything else. But before I went and put the props on, which kind of get in the way of everything, I wanted to just finish off a couple of small details that weren't in the pile of parts to fit. So you may remember way back at the beginning, you probably don't, I only just did, the little sort of aerial looking thing. We chopped off the nose to sort out the nose seam, so I know it was there because I drilled myself a hole to remember it by. I've just made a new aerial looking thing. I don't know what it's for, I don't know if it should be there or not. I did a little bit of looking at Google and I could see some had something there, some didn't. But all it is, a little piece of plastic card, relatively thin stuff, probably about 1/2 mil thick. I've just cut off a little slither, and I literally just cut off a sort of a small piece just by pressing straight down with the scalpel, and essentially just doing it by eye. As it gets smaller, it gets easier to slice, so you get a cleaner and cleaner edge, and really just figure it out as you go along and make yourself a little aerial shape like so. I know that's tiny, but it really isn't a very big piece. So that's here, ready to pop on. The other thing I did was I very clumsily broke the pitot, I think it is, off the fin. And again, I drilled myself a hole to remember it by, didn't I? So that's going to be replaced with this, and this is some of Albion Alloy's slide fit brass. It comes in tubes like this. Let me get this a bit closer. Other brass tube manufacturers are no doubt available, but in the UK the primary place for getting this stuff from is Albion Alloys. And this is the kit I've got here, although I've only got some of it left now. But this slide fit tube selection, the 0.3 to 0.9, is probably about the most useful one actually for us as modellers, and that's some very small stuff. So the hole that I've drilled in the front of the fin is a 0.5, and that's what this is. and the 0.3 slides into this, come on the camera, slides into this, and it will create that sort of stepped look. And the way to cut this is very simple. You just use the scalpel. I didn't keep the piece, I may have kept it, but I don't know where it is now, so again this is just going to be a case of making it till it looks about right. You simply choose the length you want, put the blade on it. I'm off camera again, damn it. When I zoom in I lose sort of 3 inches of mat here. So yeah, put the blade on the tube roughly where you want to cut it, and just gently, because otherwise it'll twang into next week, roll the tube under the blade. You don't have to wait for it to break all the way through, because once you've scored a good enough line you can just snap it off, just like you do when you're cutting tiles for the bathroom. And that's your little piece of 0.5. So once you're happy with the length, you know what you want, you then just in the same way cut a piece of the 0.3 stuff to put inside of it, so that it makes that last bit. And obviously the length of this is not critical because it can move in the other one, so I'll just cut a piece off. This is even easier because it's so thin. Boom. What will happen if you're doing larger pieces especially is it will absolutely crucify your blades to be honest. So this doesn't matter to me on this one, this blade's about had it anyway. But just bear that in mind, that probably the first thing you want to do on a project isn't cut little pieces of brass tube out, because it will wreck the blades. But that is the best way to cut it, unless you have a proper pipe cutter, but in these sizes that would just be hard work honestly. If you try and cut these tubes with nippers, they will cut very, very easily, but you will crush the tube and then it won't slide in inside of itself properly. So this is without a doubt the best way to do it. And once you have your pieces, simply glue them inside each other at the lengths you want, and then insert the whole thing back into the fin, assuming that you were as clumsy as I was and broke your pitot as well. And here it is done at last, you might say. The Airfix Mosquito basic build is finished. I think it's pretty obvious what I've thought about this kit as I've went through the build with you. To be fair, it's a genuinely really lovely little kit. It has a few foibles, but really nothing major. It's not the cheapest, but then it's not actually aimed completely at total beginners, so it's not ludicrously expensive for what it is. But I think there's enough of a nod towards less experienced modellers in this kit to make it an attractive one for that demographic, whilst also being a good replica with a good base for detailing for the more demanding modellers. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and it is a very pleasing little replica now that it's done. I hope that you agree, and I sincerely hope that you guys have got something out of following this build, whether you've been building along or not. Yes, very pleasing little thing. I will take some studio photos and overlay those onto my blathering now at this point. Studio photos, goodness, listen to me. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the concept of encouraging you to build along, of trying to go back to basics. Now, I have had some feedback from a few individuals, and it is a few, that this was not a beginner's build. In truth, they're probably right, because a beginner isn't going to be proficiently airbrushing things, I suppose. But in my defence, that was never really my thrust as such. My thrust is, it's for modellers with less experience, modellers who are looking to improve what they're doing, who are looking to lift their game a little bit. But, you know, modelling for intermediate or slightly less experienced folk doesn't really have the same ring to it as modelling for beginners, I feel. So there we are. Sorry, tickled myself. That's not cool, is it? So yeah, I have enjoyed it. It's a beautiful little model. I don't really like the canopy. I think if there's one thing that glares at me as being a bit less than brilliant, it's the canopy and also these nose windows. The rest of it, I think, is really very decent as it is. So yeah, I'm happy with it. Airfix have done a good job. I'm hoping now the flat coat's on, it's you can all see how those decals are really they have pretty much disappeared into that finish now. They're not got big bumps on them. It's not really obvious that they're there, none of them. They do look, to all intents and purposes, painted on. Yeah, not bad at all. So, you know, it's a basic finish, but it's competent, and that's what I'm trying to kind of advertise with this. There's no fancy pants weathering, aftermarket photo etch or resin or anything else, but what you have got is a properly built model. There's no seam lines, there's no mould lines, there's no silly little bits, there's no fingerprints in the finish, nothing like that. It's competently finished model. I think when you can get to the point of producing a model that's finished properly like this, then you've got a good base skill set to go ahead and start looking at trying to increase the complexity of your finishes. And I do not say that from an elitist point of view, it's literally just my opinion. Okay, so what do I do now? Please give me the courtesy of putting a comment. If you have any thoughts on this at all, put a comment down below for me and let me know. Would you like to see another series like this? It will still be called Modelling for Beginners because I do think that's the best way to pitch it. But we could elevate it a little bit. So, do I build a bigger model? A more complicated model? Do I throw some aftermarket in there? Do I throw some weathering in there? A more complicated paint scheme, although the D-Day stripes do serve to make this more complicated than it looks. Subject matter. You know, I've posted on Facebook already, had a little bit of feedback. Someone said a boat, someone said a tank. Sorry, a ship. Someone said a tank, someone said something I want to build, which is nice. A suggestion for a biplane, a suggestion for a 48th scale World War II fighter, something a little bit bigger, but not necessarily any more complicated. They're all good suggestions. I have a few sort of beginnings of ideas, but I'd really love your feedback. At the end of the day, it's you guys that I want to benefit from it, so please let me know what you think you might like to see in a future Modelling for Beginners series. You can nominate a specific model kit, a specific type of model, specific sort of techniques that you wanted to be covered. So, you know, if you wanted to see a biplane with some rigging, I'm a bit reticent about doing a tank or a ship. It's not that I can't make tanks and ships, I can, but I don't feel that I'm in a solid position of sort of expertise to coach somebody with building that type of model. I can certainly produce a competent ship or a tank model, but I'm probably not the best person to be looking for top tips on those, really, although we could learn together, obviously. So yeah, let me know what you think. I'm sure I'll do something. Please fear not, it will be something I want to do regardless. I did want to build this kit and I did want to do what I've done with it, so I'm happy. And there's not really much more to say than that. I really hope you've enjoyed the series. I really hope you've got something from it. I've enjoyed it and I've got things from it, and I'm looking forward to doing something similar in the future. So with all of that said, I think it only remains for me to say, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Genesis out.